Hey, welcome to Sparks. So I'm in my backyard. I've got a couple of nails here that are sticking up. I don't know if you can see them on the stairs here. And I need to hammer them back down so nobody steps on them by mistake. And I got this screwdriver, but it's not really working. I got this big old Marine Corps knife that, well, that ain't working either. So, well, that ain't gonna work. So let me finish this up here. There's a point to all this. I want to talk to you a little bit about this week's Spark and see what you think. Hey, welcome to Sparks. I'm Bob McNamara. These past few Sparks that we've been doing have talked about identity issues. Are you lonely? Do you like yourself, or do you beat yourself up? What does it mean to be a good friend? What do you stand for? What are core values? That kind of thing. What it means, what encouragement means, and all of that. And as I was thinking about what we should be talking about this time, it seems to me like if we combine some of those conversations and some of those other sparks into this one, I think you start to sort of connect some of these dots. And so I want to do that. I want to start beginning to sort of connect some of these things together. And so let me start with a story, because the topic for today is how you handle adversity, right? And in part of that is going to be how your faith plays a role in it. So, story. I've got this old friend. His name is David Shi. And David is a historian and a brilliant man. He was a president of Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina for many years. While I was a faculty member there in the late or mid 1990s to early 2000s. And David did everything well. David made things happen. And when I arrived on campus, some of my colleagues told me that we had in our department kind of a funky, eccentric secretary who sometimes made mistakes that, for example, in written communications to or about President Shi, to add what they called a silent T. So Shi is spelled S-H-I. So that was kind of a problem, right? She didn't mean to do it. It was just something that happened. And it was embarrassing for everybody. And I always thought that was a great opportunity for a word play. And it surely sounded better than the word we use now in its place, right? So so many years later, I finally get a chance to do this wordplay. And so what I'm calling the spark is when Shi happens, right? And what I mean by that is God's so good to me, and He gives me these great things to do. What I mean by that is, what do you do when adversity strikes? What happens when you're in the problem, right? When Shi happens to you. That's what we'll use for the phrase. And so one of the things that we need to talk about, I think, is how you handle adversity. What do you do when Shi happens to you? Do you withdraw? Pull away from everybody? Do you get mad? I see guys all the time. They have kind of a one-dimensional approach to adversity. When something doesn't go the way they wanted to, they get mad. They miss a shot, they get mad. They don't get a good grade, they get mad, right? You may be like that. Other people may just throw themselves into their work or sports or whatever so they don't have to think about it. Maybe you have a trusted friend that you can vent to, which is great and healthy and probably the best way to do that. But when you think about some of the problems people have, maybe your parents are going through a divorce. Maybe one of your parents or grandparents or relatives passed away because of an illness or COVID, or right, or maybe you missed that shot in the game and it was an important moment because you don't get a lot of playing time. Maybe you had a crush on somebody and they turned you down and that was devastating to you. Maybe, I don't know, you put yourself out there for a friend and they didn't reciprocate, or you found out that they weren't the person you thought they were and they were actually kind of a bully, or maybe you've experienced bullying, right? I just read the other day that bullying is a serious issue. It's been going on for a long time, but now with cyberbullying or online bullying, it's gotten even worse, right? That I think I read 80% of kids are going to be bullied at some point in their lives as a kid, and 70% of it happens online, like in Instagram and those kind of things. And most of the people that do it, they're not doing it necessarily to be mean, although some of them are. They think they're being funny, but trying to be funny by being mean has all kinds of consequences because the person doesn't know how they're going to react to it, right? And there's some connections to depression and suicidal tendencies or suicidal thoughts and all kinds of problems. So what do you do when you face adversity or when Shi happens? See, I think sometimes God uses adversity to grow us, to teach us, right? I think of when bad things happen to people, there's lots of reasons for them, right? And God is in all of those. But we tend to try to rely on our own abilities, kind of a DIY sort of answer to dealing with problems. And what God's really saying a lot of times is, hey, pay attention, I'm trying to teach you something. Remember, there's no accidents, there's no mistakes. Everything's a lesson, everything's an example, everything is an opportunity. And I think, just to get an image in my head, a lot of times God takes his finger and sticks it, that bony part of your chest, like right here, where there's no muscle, it's just bone and skin and lots of nerve endings, and when you poke, it hurts. I think that's what God does. God's kind of trying to get your attention, saying, hey, pay attention, I'm trying to teach you something here. And what I think he's trying to teach us is, do you trust me? Do you? Do you really trust me? Then why are you trying to fix this? Why don't you rely on me? Right? Pay attention to this. This is important, right? So Peter and Job and all of those people. And it was okay for them to question God and to learn to rely on their faith. Because most of us don't. And I'm guilty of that too. Anyone that knows me knows I'd much rather do things on my own. I don't like asking people for help. I'd rather figure it out on my own and then come up with a solution. But I don't like asking for help. I'm usually the first guy that's offering it when somebody needs it, but I'm not going to be the one that asks for it. And that gets me in trouble sometimes, even though there is value in having that sort of independence and autonomy and self-sufficiency and all of that stuff. I like to try to figure stuff out, and part of the solutions, and any homeowner will tell you that, you really need the right tool depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And like I did before with the nails that were sticking up on my stairs, without the right tool, it's just not going to work, right? I could use a screwdriver for a hammer. It's not going to work very well. It's probably not going to work at all, but at the very least, it's going to be harder or maybe not last as long. A knife is not a hammer. A saw is not a hammer. You get the idea, right? So some of this is figuring out the right tools. And one of the tools that I think we sometimes forget is often the simplest one. I should have just gone and got a hammer. But what I had was what was nearby, and I'm like, let me just use that and see if I can bang it in there. Well, our faith is that simple tool. It's that hammer, right? It doesn't solve every problem because not every problem is going to be solved. But you're going to have to use something when you face adversity. Do you want to rely on yourself? Sometimes it'll work. Sometimes it could be good. Sometimes that's the lesson. But the bigger lesson really isn't, hey, you figured it out on your own, that's why I gave you a brain. The bigger lesson God's trying to teach us is, yeah, sometimes, you can make things work with different kinds of tools. But on the big stuff, you really need to rely on me. And I'm going to test you to see if your faith is as strong as you claim it to be. Or maybe you don't have any faith and things aren't working and you're still having problems. And right, this is how many people come to Christ, is after they've tried all the things in their toolbox, and it still doesn't work, and they're still not happy, and they feel like they're missing something, and the problems don't go away. And God's like, okay, I'm glad you tried it. Now come to me and let me take that burden from you. So I ask you to think about that. How strong is your faith, and when do you really rely on it? Easy to rely on your faith when things are good. Even Moses was happy when he brought them close to the promised land and everybody's singing his praises. Yeah, sure, it's easy then. It's easy to raise your finger and praise God when you scored a touchdown, but what happens when you fumble? What happens when you make a mistake? What happens when you screw up? What happens when bad things happen that you could never see coming? What are you going to rely on then? Because you have to rely on something. So, think about that. Let's talk again soon. See you.